This is the new HDZero VRX, and unlike the SharkBite VRX, it requires you to install 4 antennas. But do you really need to? Let's find out. Hey everybody, I'm Bacon Ninja, and like I said, this is the HDZero VRX, which is the only VRX you can now purchase for the HDZero system. The SharkBite VRX, that was a partnership between Fat Shark and DiviMath HDZero, is no longer in production. It hasn't been for a while. So HDZero actually designed and produced their own VRX with some slight changes from what was on the SharkBite VRX. And one of those changes is that it doesn't have built-in patch antennas. Instead, it has 4 SMA ports all around the VRX. And they say that you need to populate all of the ports to get the best performance out of this VRX, or really any performance. But that begs the question, is it some kind of diversity system, or is it some kind of mixing receiver? Well, I watched an interview put out by MadsTech, I will link it in the description below, where Carl actually talks about how that works on this VRX. And it turns out it's 2 separate constellations of 2 antennas, and the VRX is using data from both of those constellations to provide bits for digital input into the digital system. But today we're going to find out if you really need all 4 antennas to run this VRX. Antennas are expensive, and if you buy this VRX from HDZero, you're going to pay $219 for just the VRX, no antennas at all. But maybe you have a couple of antennas at home and you're thinking, if I just buy the VRX and I slap a couple of antennas on it and leave a couple of empty spots, it should work, right? Well, today I'm going to test a bunch of different combinations of that, and I'm going to run it with no antennas at all to see what the performance looks like. Now, a disclaimer before I start showing you all the footage. This test is not scientific at all. There was no scientific equipment used. I did try to control as many variables as possible, and I'll go over what those were with you, but the results may not be repeatable. These are just the results that I got on this particular day under the particular weather conditions and equipment I was using. So, having said that, let's get to the specifics of what I could control. So I went out to my usual spot, which is anywhere from 0 feet in front of me to 1,300 feet out in front of me and back. And I took my Freestyle build, which has the Freestyle VTX in it with the Lumineer AXII button antenna on it. So it's not an ideal transmitter by any means, but it's my Freestyle setup. And for this, I'm running the full output power of the Freestyle VTX to do the testing. But all the testing was done on this quad. For the HDZero VRX, I am using XAir 5.8 antennas from TruRC and Lumineer AXII Micro V2s for my omnis on top in this arrangement that you see here. Now what I'll be doing is taking some of these off a little at a time and testing far out and back to see what it looks like, as well as flying behind myself and flying behind an obstacle, which in this case was a large tree, because HDZero and trees are probably the worst combination I could find where I'm at. So to get started, I'm going to show you the baseline footage, which is everything in order as it should be according to the manufacturer, and a 1,300 foot test, as well as behind myself and behind a tree. Let's take a look at that. So that went about as I expected. Having run the SharkBite VRX before this, that's about the results that I got with the SharkBite VRX. I will say the TruRCs are probably a little better patch antennas than what's built onto the SharkBite VRX, but those are results that I kind of expected, having done this before with the SharkBite VRX and the exact same quad that I'm using here. So for this next test, what I'm going to do is actually remove one of the patch antennas from the left side of the VRX. Let's see what that looks like. Flying out the same way, left patch antenna removed. Just running two Omnis and the right patch antenna. Actually doing really well. I figured it would be way worse than this. Like way worse than this. The breakup's a little bit worse. Perfect. To be honest, I was a little surprised when I did that. I expected this thing to not function anywhere near as well as it did on the baseline. But it really didn't do too badly. There was a little more breakup on the way back. There really wasn't as much breakup as I thought there was going to be, considering everyone says you should run 4 antennas on this VRX. It is a mandatory thing. And even the signal bars in the top right didn't seem to reflect a missing antenna for a little while, until I was probably 500 or 600 feet away from myself. I was really surprised by that, but I continued on and I removed an Omni antenna from the right side. Let's see what that does to the HDZero VRX. Left patch removed, right Omni removed on the goggles. We're just running 2 antennas right now. Okay. Alright, let's go see what happens whenever I go behind a tree. Gonna go behind this tree. Again, I was pretty surprised at this. I'm missing half of the antennas required to run this VRX, and I'm still getting a reasonable amount of range. I flew all the way out to 1,300 feet and back. Now, the breakup was worse. It did worse behind a tree. It did a little bit worse behind myself, but it really wasn't as terrible as I was expecting it to be. I thought it was going to be horrible at this point. So I thought, let's take all the antennas off and see what that does. So I removed both of the Omnis, yes, both of them, and both patches. Ooh. And I ran the VRX just like this. Absolutely no antennas at all. Let's see what that does for the HDZero VRX.
No antennas at all. No antennas at all. That was rough. Still pretty rough. Behind myself is, you know, not great. I don't think I'm gonna do the tree on this one.
When I went into this test, I expected to barely get in front of myself before I had no reception at all. I mean, it has no antennas. I am running the max output power from the Freestyle VTX, which is a lot of output power. It's 1,000 milliwatts, but I have no antennas on the receiver. I was pretty surprised. I got out to probably around 1,000 feet with no antennas at all. Now, I didn't get a rainbow screen. I was expecting to get a rainbow screen and essentially lose my quad in the bushes somewhere and have to go walk and find it. However, I did get a boatload of static, and I had to turn around early just because of that, because I knew that as I turned, I was going to put my battery between myself and the antenna on the quad, and it was going to be worse on the way back than it was going, and it was getting pretty terrible going. So I turned around a bit early, but not nearly as early as I thought I was going to need to. Now behind me was about the same. You know, it's pretty bad. I didn't expect behind me to be good at all, but I was incredibly surprised at what I got with no antennas installed at all on this VRX. Well, that's all the combinations I could really come up with that made sense to test as far as missing antennas. But maybe you just want to run a couple of Omnis, right? It's possible. So I screwed my Omnis back on to the VRX in this orientation here. Let me get these axes on. And ran it just like this, with just two Omnis on top. Let's see if that does anything for us.
Just two Omnis. Just two Omnis. Pretty staticky. Solar steady. Now we're back. Pretty staticky on just two Omnis. Pretty static. Alright, let's fly behind myself. Fine back there. Let's go behind a tree. I'm gonna be kind of careful here. It's not good. good. Okay.
With just the two Omnis, the results were actually pretty good. If I had to run it like this, if for some reason I didn't have any antennas for the patch ports or, you know, whatever you want to run on the side here, I think I would. Going behind myself was acceptable. Going in front of myself was acceptable. I made it all the way out and back. Behind a tree was pretty terrible, but if you're in open air, you can get away with it. And that tree is pretty thick, and it's full of green leaves. It is beginning to soak up all of the water of the spring season, so it's as bad as it's going to get behind that tree. I was really surprised again by how well it did with missing antennas on this. But then again, there are other options. Maybe you want to run 4 Omni antennas. So I had a couple of 90-degree versions of these AXIs laying around, and I screwed those onto either side, and I ran this in a 4 Omni configuration.
4 Omnis, no patches. Alright, you're gonna do a couple things here. I'm gonna fly behind myself. Behind myself is no problem. Alright, now we're gonna go fly behind this tree. Tree's always a little rough, but it's about the same level of roughness.
And in that configuration, it did as I expected it to do. It's almost as good as running patches on the side. Now, again, I'm not doing any crazy long range here, and my build is not ideal as far as the transmitter goes with this little stubby AXI antenna on it. But 4 Omnis did really well. I think if all you had was a bunch of random Omnis, you could get away with it and start using HDZero and not have to buy a whole bunch of new antennas just for your HDZero VRX. But all this goes to say, do you really need to run 4 antennas on the HDZero VRX? Is it absolutely a necessity to do that? By the time you buy the HDZero VRX, which is $219 on its own with no antennas at all, and throw 4 new antennas on the thing, because you're probably going to buy decent quality antennas, you're going to spend over $300 on this setup. Now, if you could save $75 and use some things you had laying around in your drawer to populate a couple of the ports, would it be worth it? I don't know. I think that even though I was really surprised by the results I got by running missing antennas and no antennas at all, that populating all 4 is definitely the best way to go. It performed its absolute best when I did that. But should you run patches or dual Omnis or 4 Omnis? That's a different question. If you are the kind of pilot that flies behind themselves a lot, having multiple Omnis, more than 2 even, may be viable. If you're flying tiny whoops, now that there is a 1S version of the HDZero VTX, maybe you want 4 stubby Omnis if you're going to stay really in close to yourself. Maybe you want to minimize reflections and not pick up those in your video feed. Well, 4 low gain Omnis might be the way to go. For me, I'm going to continue running 2 patches and 2 Omnis. I do fly in front of myself quite a bit. Normally not more than about 100 degrees in that zone. So for me, it's the 2 patches and 2 Omnis. But I say mix and match as much as you want on what's in the SMAs. Fill all of the ports with something. and you'll get good results out of the HDZero VRX. Well, I hope that helps make some decisions about what you're going to be running on your HDZero VRX if it's something you're looking into. And I'm just going to answer another question while we're here. If you are a newcomer to HDZero, and you may have a camera and you may have a VTX at home, but you haven't been able to get your hands on a VRX, this HDZero VRX is absolutely for you. If you're asking yourself if you should wait for the HDZero goggles and not purchase this VRX, I think that's not the way to go. I think you should go ahead and buy this VRX. I think that you should populate it with any antennas you like, as long as you populate all 4 SMA ports. And I think you should just start flying HDZero today. Now, when the goggles come out, if you want to purchase those, that's terrific. Your HDZero VRX becomes a ride-along with a HDMI-capable monitor or a spare in case something breaks in your HDZero goggles. They will be a first revision, so who knows what's going to happen there. It wouldn't be a bad idea to have a VRX in the drawer, just in case. But if you already have a SharkBite VRX today, and you're thinking, maybe I want to upgrade to the HDZero VRX, I don't know that that's worth it. You're going to spend at least $219, and that's if you have antennas at home to fill it with. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. If you don't, you're going to spend more than that. And the feature set that it brings is not really meant to be an upgrade to the SharkBite VRX. I mean, you get things like onboard ambient audio recording in your DVR, a real-time clock for the DVR so that it timestamps your videos correctly, some slide-on rails for future patches that TruRC is going to make, and a plug-in port for the backpack, so you don't have to open up the back and solder on your ELRS backpack to control your VRX. It's a pretty cool function. But none of that is absolutely necessary, or I think worth spending $300 to replace your SharkBite VRX with. If you have the SharkBite VRX, I think you should just stick with it, and then still wait for the HDZero goggles to come out and make a different decision then, because those will probably be worth it based on the specs that I have seen in a bunch of the renders on the Facebook group. It's going to be gorgeous and amazing if it meets all of the criteria that people have set out for it, which it looks like it's going to. Very excited to see those. But if you don't have HDZero today, this VRX is for you. If you do have a SharkBite VRX at home, I wouldn't run out and buy this thing. Just my opinion. Take it for what you want. But anyway, I appreciate you guys hanging in there with me. Thank you very much for watching. If this video has been helpful, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't yet, I'd really appreciate you subscribing to the channel. I'm working my way up to 1,000 subscribers, and when we get there, I'm gonna do a special little thing. It's called a giveaway. I'm just gonna tell everyone now, it will be a giveaway, but I'm gonna do the first giveaway on this channel when we reach 1,000 subscribers. So I'd appreciate you being part of that first 1,000 group. Very, very much. Thanks again, and until next time, I will catch you later.